Nietzsche's church. By his name in the register, it says by his death, it notes that he was a known antichrist. Now, of course, we can search back through genealogical records and we can find, the names of Nietzsche's parents and grandparents and so on. And let's just stick with this notion of genealogy, because one of Nietzsche's greatest works is the genealogy of morals. So this is not a search back into our biological past, but Nietzsche does a search back into our moral past. So how did we get to where we are today through the history of morality? So just like you might be able to understand why your nose is a certain shape, or why you're a certain height, or your eyes are a certain color by going through your genealogical history, Nietzsche does the same for the cultural values which we have today, or of course in his time, which were absolutely predominantly Christian. So if we think about what we value today, what's the dominant moral framework that we all live inside, then it's things like love, kindness, peace, giving, and maybe Barney can help us understand this.
Won't you say you love me too? I love you, you love me. We're best friends like friends should be. With a great big hug and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too?
So those things, like those children enjoying a Barney, having a Barney with Barney, those values are deep in us. These things are our spontaneous, deep response to the moral world. We don't think love and kindness and giving are, let's say, accidental or sort of thin or superficial. These are absolute, they feel like these are values which have been with us forever. But what Nietzsche radically does through his book, The Genealogy of Morals, is that he questions the truth and the permanence of those values. And in fact, he does something quite a bit darker. He exposes that actually behind the surface level of those values, there's actually a power game going on. And for this, we need to go into the Old Testament. That's where it all starts. It all starts with a man called Abraham. In fact, we could draw a line for this. Let's do a kind of a historical line to show the ups and downs of the Jewish faith, which eventually, of course, became Christianity. And this line would go something like this. You'd have an upswing with Abraham towards David and the state of Israel. And then from this high point in about 1000 BC, things would decline. And this decline is an important historical line for Nietzsche's thinking. And it's a line which ends up at Jesus. And something critical happens with Jesus, says Nietzsche, where morality shifted. But let's put this line in place and let's plot some key moments on that line. So like I said, Abraham, nomadic, living in the area of Palestine. Eventually, to cut a long story short, if we jump through Moses and the Prince of Egypt and all that Disney stuff, we get to this moment where David in 1000 BCE is king of Israel. It's a state of it. It's a theocracy. The Jews own the land and they get to decide its laws. They get to do their rituals. They get to practice and praise the God that has given them two things. God has promised and delivered on two huge promises. First, land. Secondly, children. So everything is good. This is like the high point of Jewish history. The Star of David, of course, on the modern Israeli flag celebrates this. So in 1000 BCE, we have a high point of Jewish history. But things start going wrong. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians invade and they take off half of northern Israel. It's annexed into the Assyrian Empire. But Judea down south is safe for the moment. But in 586 BC, the Babylonians invade, and for 50 years, the Jews live in exile in Babylon. And this, of course, is an absolutely devastating blow to Jewish psychology and Jewish belief, because you could ask the question, well, what is God doing? Why did God not help them? Why did God not protect them like he had done in the past? And of course, the answer that the Jews found was that, well, in a sense, it was their own fault. The prophets had warned them that if their behavior didn't improve, then God would send punishments to sort of teach them a lesson. So you have a kind of cosmic world here in which good behavior is rewarded and bad behavior is punished, and it's played out through ancient empires.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yeah, we will, when we remembered Zion. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yeah, we will, when we remember.
Now, good news for the Jews. In 536 BCE, Cyrus the Great, he's great for a few reasons, but one of the reasons he's great is that he releases the Jews and allows them, by defeating the Babylonian Empire, the Jews can now go home. But they can go home, but they still don't own the land. And after Cyrus the Great and the Persians came the Greeks under Alexander the Great. And after Alexander the Great came the Romans in 63 BC. So we're almost at Jesus. Now, with each of these empires rolling in and rolling out of the ancient world, the area of Palestine, it became increasingly implausible that the Jews would be able to get back to what they had with David back in 1000 BCE. So they're kind of confronted by this existential question of like, well, how do we do this? How do we gain control and power over the land of Palestine again? And in this period from like in the last 100 years before Jesus is born, if you look at Jewish literature, it's got all kinds of answers to this question. You have people called the Essenes, for example, who are trying to be mystic and be pure, ritually pure, and in a way symbolically trying to bring a new Messiah down to kind of smash away the Romans. And you also have the Zealots. You have people who try to do it with political force. These are like the first terrorists, ironically. The first terrorists are Jews trying to get rid of the Romans. So you have this kind of, before Jesus is born, you have all kinds of different ideas about how to restore Israel to the good old days with David. But Nietzsche's interested in what happens next. Nietzsche's interested in the move on the chessboard which happens with Jesus. And he calls this move the slave revolt.